Welcome back to this week's episode of The Recovery Life. This is our 6th episode. Can you believe it?
Wow.
It's pretty crazy. Earlier this week, you heard us talk with Sissy and Jessica, 2 other staff members here at Graciously Broken, just about a few different questions that were submitted by our residents, as well as just that naturally came up through the conversation. So if you haven't listened to that, go ahead and check that out as well. But today we want to talk about everybody's favorite topic, boundaries. Boundaries can be very difficult to identify as for what's important for you. It can also be very difficult to maintain them and hold yourself accountable as well as others. So I think this will be an interesting conversation for sure. So let's dig into it, guys.
All right.
Okay. Why are boundaries important? Obviously they're important for everybody everywhere, but in the context of people working recovery and living the recovery life, why are they so important?
Several reasons, I think. One is we tend to teach people how to treat us, right? And so boundaries, when we figure out what they are for us, really represent or reflect our values and how we feel about ourselves. And so if I have little self-worth and I feel like I'm not worth anything, then my boundaries are going to reflect that. I'm going to be very loose with my boundaries, where people can take advantage of me or whatever. And so I think that's one reason, is it really kind of lets people know what's okay and what's not okay with us.
Yeah.
I also think that, once you start getting clean, life can get really full. And if you're not careful, even though you're involved in a lot of good things, they're still not necessarily healthy for you. We don't know how to say no. And so we say yes to everything. And so I think boundaries assist with that as well.
Yeah. How long did it take you guys to kind of figure out and maintain healthy boundaries in your recovery?
Well, I'm still learning.
9 years in?
Yeah, 9 years in. I'm still learning. But there was probably 2 or 3, maybe 4 years in where I really understood the benefits of it. And, after you get hurt or burned or tempted so many times, then you kind of wake up. And so it took me 3 or 4 years to really understand it, and then since then I'm still working on it.
Yeah.
It took me counseling to even realize I had a right to boundaries. I didn't really grow up knowing that, and especially in addiction, I didn't know anything about boundaries, and I really didn't think I had a right to myself.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think especially as believers, we struggle with this idea of boundaries, this ability that it's okay to say no and not feel like we have to give everything to everyone at all times. Learning that balance is difficult. So boundaries were a very hard thing for me to understand. And they're hard to live by too, for me.
You said this we just got back from a staff retreat a few days ago, and you said it on the staff retreat, but it was also something that I had just heard either on another podcast or in a sermon or something on social media or something. I don't remember, but sometimes no is a complete sentence. And not that you never have dialogue about a boundary, but like if there's someone in your life who maybe isn't great at seeing a boundary or accepting or acknowledging a boundary, sometimes saying no is the boundary, and that is a complete sentence. And so learning to be comfortable in saying that and being content of like, I don't really owe anybody an explanation of why this is a boundary, but it is, and obviously sometimes it's good to talk about it and have dialogue and help somebody else learn, but also like advocating for yourself too. What if obviously if you feel comfortable sharing, like what was a boundary that you set for yourself? You know, a few weeks ago we talked about non-negotiables in your recovery. But as far as like a boundary with relationships or whatever, what's one that has been kind of important in your walk?
Well, probably the one that stands out the most to me is just not putting myself in situations or circumstances that serve alcohol. So I don't go to weddings where they're serving alcohol, or I don't go to certain parts of the wedding that they're serving alcohol. My husband has chosen to abstain and from alcohol, and even though he doesn't have an addiction issue when it comes to substances, so those are some boundaries that have been really important for me to set in place. It's hard with relational boundaries because those are some other areas I've learned to grow in relationally that, you know, I've learned over the years that I can't say yes to everyone. I can't say yes to everything, and I can't answer the phone call every time it rings. And I don't know, this might go into another question, but I think for me, I've had to learn, like, what do I value? And so the things that I value are the things that come naturally or are easier to set boundaries to. So if you're thinking of a relationship, well, if I value not hurting someone or being liked more than I value me being healthy, like in a relationship, then there will be no boundaries when it comes to that person or whether or not they're in my life or not. But if I value myself or the health of my recovery and my family and just spirituality, you know, all of those things, then it's not going to matter as much for me to set those boundaries and they get hurt, because in the end, it's what was best or what was right.
And I think that this was actually what I was going to say, so you led me into it. For me, as someone who, you know, addiction is very prevalent in my family, I might not have an issue with a substance, but I've chosen, you know, when I'm with you or having people over to our home or our wedding reception, you know, we choose not to have alcohol there. And that is because even though I might not have an issue with it, there are so many people in my life who I love and want to walk alongside them with. And I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm just saying, like, for me, when I'm looking at other people's boundaries, I just think it's not hurting me not to have alcohol. My life isn't anything less not to have a drink when I get home or when we're having a family get together or at our wedding. Like, our wedding reception was wonderful without it, you know? And so to me, it's like, if I love and respect the people in my life, like, you have to evaluate that and say, like, I'm not losing anything by respecting this person's boundary. I'm actually just really loving them. And even if you do feel like you're missing out, quote unquote, then that might lead to the question of, like, why do you feel like you're missing out? Like, let's follow that trail for a second, you know? And so, and again, that's not to toot my own horn. It's just like, that's helped me, I think, learn how to love people better.
You know, Amanda what she's talking about made me think, you know, we do a boundary study here, and one of the things that it talks about is there's a difference between hurting and harming someone. And I think one reason we have a hard time sticking to, like, we can identify what boundaries we need, but then when someone comes up and pushes up against them, it's harder for us to maintain those boundaries. And I think it's because we're afraid of hurting someone, right? But what we have to learn is that there's a difference between hurting someone and harming someone. My boundaries are going to hurt someone if they don't have respect for boundaries. So if they're a manipulator or a controller or someone who wants what they want when they want it,
Needy.
right? Right. Then my boundaries are going to hurt them
Yeah.
because I'm not giving them what they want, but it doesn't mean it's harming them. It's
Right.
actually maybe to their benefit that I set that boundary.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I think looking at it that way and understanding the difference and knowing that just because someone doesn't agree with
Mm-hmm.
my boundaries doesn't mean that they're wrong.
Yeah, for sure.
You know,
Yep. What advice would you give someone who is either new to setting boundaries or just it makes them really uncomfortable? What advice would you give people who are kind of starting to walk that path?
I would say start where you feel safest.
Mm.
So if you have a difficult relationship in your life, especially, you know, it's going to be harder there. So it's kind of like learning to trust God, right? You trust him with
Yeah.
something small, he proves faithful, and then you learn to trust him with more. I think the same for boundaries is when you're first starting out, practice them with someone who's safe,
Yeah.
you know,
Mm.
so that someone who sees the value of boundaries and who would respect them so that you can learn and get your feet
Yeah.
under you.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. When I went through Brentwood outpatient program, that's what they taught us. And actually, Samantha, you were one of the ones that we practiced this with. I don't know if you remember that, but
Mm-mm.
it wasn't like hard boundaries or anything, but it was like learning how to communicate your feelings. And so like they gave I think I did one with you. I think I did one with my mom and just different people that I was close to that I knew
Yeah.
would love me no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And
Do you remember what it was?
I don't remember
Oh,
exactly
that's so
what it was,
crazy.
but anyway, so I agree with that. I think starting with
Yeah.
those who are safe that you know that we could practice. The other advice I'd give is get the book Boundaries by Henry Cloud.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And that's a book that our girls you teach, right?
Yeah, they walk through.
They walk through that book with you. Yeah.
and then also do your steps
Yep.
so you can identify who you need to set boundaries with.
Going
You know,
back to the steps.
And know that it's not going to feel good at first.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be, especially if you struggle with this or you struggle with codependency,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be completely outside of your comfort zone.
What's codependency?
Codependency is very broad.
Mm-hmm.
So it can come out in a lot of different ways. One thing I think of is if your happiness depends on the happiness of those around you,
Mm-hmm.
you may be codependent.
Okay.
You know, but it really is such a broad topic.
Yeah. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around it.
Right.
I'm sure that I am codependent in some ways,
Mm-hmm.
but it's hard to fully articulate it. Here's a thought. Okay, so you have started practicing. You've gone to your mom and your cousin to set boundaries. Did I know that you were setting them out? Did you tell me like
it wasn't quite like boundaries. It was
yeah.
It was like probably some amends in it, and I forgot like exactly what it was.
I don't even remember. I wish I could remember what you're talking
I
about.
think kind of what it was like me saying how I feel, like, or like where I'm at,
Yeah.
and you getting a chance to say how you feel.
Huh.
And I think part of it was maybe like taking time on the phone, like to talk, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't remember exactly what it was.
Do you remember? Sorry, we're going back to history. If anybody doesn't know, Amanda is my cousin, so we grew up together and we lived together for a little while as adults. But I used to do this ridiculous.
She's going to embarrass me or something.
No, I'm gonna embarrass myself. I used to do this ridiculous and like totally inconsiderate thing when I was on the phone with her, where she'd be talking to me and I'd start singing a song as she's talking to me, and you'd be like, "You're not listening to me."
I remember that.
I don't think it happened all the time, but it definitely happened more than once. And I was like, "No, I'm listening." And I don't know what was going on in my brain, but I was just like, just like singing on the phone while you're trying to like have a real conversation with me.
That sounds like every day in the office.
I know. I'm constantly singing and making up a song or relating something like to an 80s rock song or something. But Or Justin Bieber, but
Oh Lord.
we won't go there. Okay, so yeah, that was pretty funny.
That's funny.
I don't know if I'm going to keep that in, but I think that's really funny. And what made me think of it was like, I really hope that I didn't do that when you were trying to practice like good communication. And I'm like, yeah, whatever.
Right. No, you didn't.
Bye, bye, bye.
We love a good NSYNC throwback. I don't even know where we were going with that.
I don't either.
I don't either.
So we'll cut that out.
Maybe. We'll see. So let's say that you have started those hard conversations with safe people, and now you've kind of got the hang of it a little bit, but then you've got that one friend at church or at school or at work who just is oblivious to boundaries. And they, whether you've told them subtly or just outright, I'm not comfortable with this. This is a boundary I need to set. And they just continually keep crossing it. Like, what is your advice to handle those situations?
One thing we talk about here is identifying people who are safe for you, right? And so if this is someone that we're supposed to be friends with, and I value that relationship, and I've had conversations, and I've been very honest. I mean, you can't if you haven't been completely subtlety. Not everybody picks up on that, right? And so if you've tried subtlety, it doesn't work, and then you've had a very blunt conversation. If they're still not respecting that boundary that you have in place, the next question I would ask myself is, one, is this really someone I want to have a relationship with?
Yeah.
Are they safe for me? And go from there. And if the answer is, man, I really want this relationship, but this is just not okay, then it may be having another conversation. But then there may get a point where you have to really say, okay, is this worth it? Like, they're not going to stop this. Yeah. So, can I deal with it and make allowances for it? Or is this just not necessarily the relationship that I want to be in?
And find ways to love them from afar.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's good advice. That's why you make the big bucks.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What helps you? Because, everybody has boundaries. Everybody has limits. And it's unrealistic to think that we can all remember and respect everybody's boundaries all the time. Not out of apathy, but just out of, I only have so much in my brain at once that I can do. But how can we train ourselves for people who don't know what boundaries are to then trying to not only set them, but also respect them? How do you train your brain and your heart to do that?
I think that's good, because especially if you're dealing with someone who has a hard time setting boundaries, it's very easy for you to take advantage of their lack of boundaries, right? Yeah. And so, you have to. I think one thing is you have to care. I say this a lot to the girls, because so many things just boil down to simple. You have to care.
Yeah.
Like, you have to care. Whether you're walking with, like, whether you're pleasing him, you have to actually care about your coworkers if you're going to be a respecter of boundaries. And so I think that's one thing, is just, do I love them enough that even if this makes my day more difficult, I'm not going to push them on this issue because I know they have a hard time saying no.
Yeah.
I think, and you just have to care. And it's hard sometimes. It's easy to be a supporter of someone's boundaries when you're teaching them or helping them make them with other people.
Yeah.
But then when their boundaries knock up against what you want in the moment, it's a lot harder
to care. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, I think that's a good place to stop. I really appreciate, your insight. And I say that every week, and it's true every week, I tell you. For those listening, we are so grateful that you are listening. Definitely make sure that you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you comment down below any thoughts or questions that you might want us to cover in future episodes. And then also be sure to like and follow us on Facebook at Graciously Broken Ministries and on Instagram at Graciously Broken Ministries 2016. And then if you want any more detailed information about our ministry, you can go to www.graciously.broken.com. And we hope that you will join us next week. We will be back on our regular schedule of posting our podcast episodes on Fridays. So hope you guys have an awesome weekend, and we will talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.